Hello, everybody. My name is James Gore. I'm chair of the Board of Supervisors here in Sonoma County and a director for Sonoma Water. I appreciate you being with us here today. This is for us to go through a question and answer with some of our water experts and to talk about where we're at here in Sonoma County with respect to drought, water resiliency, plans that we have going forward, announcements of funding, and ways that you can be a part of the solution. Start with, we all have to realize that we live in a changing climate. And the folks at Sonoma Water and all of our city partners and the county overall has done an amazing amount of work to build us up to a place where our systems are enhanced, where the conservation culture is embedding deeper and deeper into the work that we do. But we all know that without water, there is no life here. There is no economy. There is no community development, and all the things that we deal with, we're going to have to constrain ourselves and make sure that we do bigger and better. And so our goal here today is to talk through some of those things and make sure you know what we know and that you can respond to us and we can work together on where we go in the future. I have the pleasure today of having General Manager of Sonoma Water, Grant Davis, and also Don Seymour from the Water Agency, who knows this stuff front and back. I mean, the rest of us can talk about the ideas and where we need to go. Don's the one who actually analyzes what's feasible, what's possible, and how we get it done. So I want to thank both of you for being here with us. And really, we're going to start with Grant. Grant, you've been the general manager for quite some time at Sonoma Water. You've seen droughts, you've seen floods. You operate a utility on one side, but then you also have this unbelievable role of helping to prepare us for the future of water. And so Grant, would appreciate you to give us an initial response to how we are coming out of this winter. The reality that although we had a ton of rain at the front end and we were all doing our rain dances and excited after a severe drought last year, that we're not in a good place. And but we can take action to do okay within those constraints. So if you can give us an overview and we'll move on from there.
Thank you, Chair Gore. I wish I could say otherwise, but the drought is not over. We know this because of the current water supply situation in our smaller reservoir, Lake Mendocino, and also Lake Sonoma, the two buckets that we rely on for delivering drinking water to over 600,000 customers in the region. Under your leadership, we've done quite well to work in coordination, which is one of our strengths. So the fact is that we have a vibrant partnership called the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership. And we've added last year, we've added Cloverdale and Healdsburg into that group of contractors that are delivering services, the retailers. So I'm pleased about that because it makes us stronger. I think that we'd hoped to have had a reprieve and to get out from what we call weather whiplash, going from flood years in 2019. We were all looking at Guerneville and trying to respond, and now we're in basically the third year of drought conditions. And for water managers, our challenge is how to effectively respond and account for both dry and very wet, which is what climate change is all about. So this year, ironically, we're in better shape in Lake Mendocino by several thousand acre feet of water. At this time of year, we have more than we had last year. Doesn't mean that we've got any to waste and we're going to have to meter it out, but it's better than we were last year going into this summer. Ironically, Lake Sonoma, even though we had those two large rain events in October and December, and it did help improve the conditions, we have less water in Lake Sonoma than we did at this time last year. So we're managing for less water, and we're building off of the great work that happened all the last couple of years to coordinate with our state and federal partners and our local retailers. So as a director of our Sonoma Water, you have, and you'll talk about, I think, the types of strategies and the types of dollars that are coming in that we're leveraging, the state and federal dollars coming in to understand atmospheric rivers, to work on solutions, is really significant and much appreciated.
Well, Grant, it's funny you mention this because when people try and think about what it means reservoirs, I think for folks it's an understanding that number one is Lake Mendocino, if it's full or wherever state it's at, is there's water releases that are controlled that come out of Lake Mendocino. They come down the main stem of the Russian River, and at a point where Dry Creek really intersects with the Russian River just south of Healdsburg, Dry Creek is really the water coming down from Lake Sonoma. Both of those waters come together, and then they go down further into the river system, and we have collector wells down around the Roller Bridge area for folks who know where that is. And that really pumps up water and puts it into the pipes and into the system that actually delivers water to the majority of the residents in Sonoma County and some in Marin County as well. And so the Lake Mendocino is really, the water supply, with that water coming down the Russian River for also those folks that cannot depend upon Lake Sonoma, that being Hillsburg, Alexander Valley, Cloverdale, Geyserville, those sections. So there's two different worlds that we have to think about at all times. One of the things that we dealt with last year was a countywide reduction in water usage. That was a voluntary at the front end, voluntary water reduction, and then moving further and further into the system. And can you remind us, with Lake Sonoma, where it's at, there's actually written into its basically operating procedures that if we get down to a certain level, we implement mandatory conservation, not just voluntary conservation. Can you remind folks what they could see as we manage those waters going forward?
Yeah, that's a good explanation, actually, Chair Gore. We, in Lake Sonoma, which has got multi-year storage, it's designed that way. It's our larger reservoir. Currently about 150,000 acre feet of water supply going in, which is a little bit less than last year, as I mentioned. We have a water right that's issued by the State Water Resources Control Board in Sacramento. It's called Decision 1610. And in there, they account for a situation where if Lake Sonoma gets down into the 100,000 acre foot level, and I like to repeat that, we sell probably on any given year, the last few years, anywhere from 45 to 50,000 acre feet. So that's the context. But nevertheless, if we're down 100,000 acre feet, we are not just going to go from flipping a switch and turning into a 30% reductions that are mandatory. We'll be monitoring and doing all that we can to use water efficiently and ask our customers to cut back and to implement more and more aggressive conservation. But the fact is, our water right does have a provision which talks about 30% reductions and diversions and conservation out of Lake Sonoma as a source when you're down at the 100,000 acre foot level, which we've never been, but we're managing accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate that. And this is a good segue over to Don, because, really the goal is not to use the full system. If we have 150,000 acre feet, to just use it as if it was in a normal year, go down to 100, and then, as you say, hit the light switch and turn it off. We do a lot of voluntary work. We do reductions going forward to try and make the best use of that water going down into the system. And so Don, maybe you can lean in and this is a question for you as a water manager. How do you manage a system when we don't have winter rain like we've had? What are the key steps that we take as Sonoma Water in response to ongoing drought conditions? What are some of the tools that we use to deal with the drought?
Well, thank you, Director Gore. Well, I would point out, I think, we did receive some of those winter rains in October, December, which really increased flows in the Russian River. There was a lot of natural water available. And this year, one of the things we tried to do was leverage some of that winter water, offset local supplies that our contractors generally use, and let those resources rest so that they're available as we come into the dry season. A really good example is Marin Municipal. They were during December and January, when a lot of water was available to divert out of the river, they leaned on aqueduct water more and let their reservoirs fill and used our water in lieu. So for one thing, they're going to be coming into this year in a much better position than they were last year, much less desperate. But I would say a lot of the tools we use has been, for one thing, we have been filing petitions with the state board for temporary changes to minimum stream flow requirements to reduce those flows to levels that the available storage can support, so we don't drain those reservoirs trying to maintain really high minimum stream flows. And one of the actions Sonoma Water took last year was to reduce our diversions out of the Russian River between July and November by over 20% compared to 2020. Those were actual savings. So and those are tools we're going to likely lean on this year to preserve that storage in Lake Sonoma in particular.
Don, I appreciate you bringing that up, because basically the most important thing we can do is we turn down the tap, right? So for folks who don't realize this is that we operate a natural system. We don't just have pipes everywhere that are going. We move water by moving it down the Russian River, down Dry Creek. And then, as you say, we have aqueducts and we also have pipes that go into different areas. And so turning it down is the most important thing that you can do to conserve water. But at the same time, we also have other things that we have to do. Since we move it down a river system, we have to make sure there's enough water for fish, right? We have to make sure there's enough water that we track what's going on with the recreation component, even though that's not protected by law. We have folks who go and recreate on the Russian River all year, and we have things like outbreaks of blue-green algae and other things if we get stagnant water. So we have to manage it for multiple uses. So one of the other things that Grant alluded to is the opportunity for us to do a couple things that I know you've talked with me about. Number one is make better use of our water in the winter time. Winter water usage to fill up Marin County and other areas as we move through that. Another thing that you and I have talked about that other people ask us is, why don't you guys set up a desalination plant? And from my conversations with you and others, it's been, well, that's extremely expensive, $5,000 an acre foot, which is cost prohibitive, especially with the geography that we have, and how it would be better for us to actually use reclaimed water, and that's cheaper to use wastewater to get back into the system than it is to actually just try to take salt water and debrine it and find a place to dump that. And then quite a few other things that you do outside of just the water management system. Do you want to elaborate on any of those?
I agree. Something like desal is just, it's not the low-hanging fruit. There's other opportunities for water supply projects that are much more within our reach, much more financially advantageous. For example, we're looking at possibilities of groundwater banking in several of the basins in Sonoma County, taking that winter water that I was just talking about and, storing it in some of those basins for summer use to offset the need for Russian River water. As you're aware, and we've reported to you, Sonoma Water, along with its contractors, the cities and districts it supplies water to, have been working collaboratively on a regional water supply resiliency study that's developed a decision support model that we're now using to really look at where we can focus our limited resources and get the biggest bang for our buck. So I completely agree with you. Some of these very high cost projects, we can avoid them, and particularly be able to use this new tool to look at how we can optimize our both operations and potentially and local regional projects that can really improve the reliability of our system.
Well, I love that we have you with your hand on the dial, right? I think back to also a big success from our drought all the way back into 2012, when in Lake Mendocino, with clear skies, our partner federal agency, the Army Corps of Engineers, released 25,000 acre feet of water at a time when there was only clear skies projected for the course over a month going forward. And that was because they used an old system, an old antiquated system, but we had to join with them and spend tens of millions of dollars to create a new system, something we call forecast informed reservoir operations, to be able to provide certainty that we could keep that water and that our projections were really valid on the meteorological side. That's yielded huge gains in terms of 10,000 to 15,000 acre feet in the system. And I know we're looking at taking those winds from Lake Mendocino with increased storage over the winter instead of dumping it because we're worried about floods when it doesn't look like it's going to rain, and translate that over to Lake Sonoma as well. So we're going to be able to hold more water in that. One of the things that I think is important for us to talk about conceptually and just kind of winding this all together is what I've heard you say is our ability to get more water into the basins. And for folks who don't know this, is that the future of water storage is not more reservoirs above ground. The future of water storage is making sure that when we have these rain events, we get as much water to percolate down into these basins, into these aquifers as possible. And so one way that we're looking at doing that, we've already had successful pilots out in Sonoma Valley and other areas, but we recently got $6.9 million from the Department of Water Resources at the state for 2 wells in the Santa Rosa Plain area to go into where we're going to get these wells stood up up to speed and will be able to use water during water plentiful times and pull it out. But at other times when there's high winter flows, we'll be able to put the water into those wells to percolate back down into the groundwater profile. That's something called aquifer storage and recharge. Similarly, we got $2 million in a grant for water resiliency in what we call the northern system, which is not dependent upon Lake Sonoma. So like Hillsburg all the way up with our partners in Mendocino County up to Potter Valley, to make sure that we're resilient long-term for things like the uncertainty around what people have heard as the Potter Valley Project, which is a deep conversation that we won't get fully into here, but we have to expect that we're going to depend less upon water from the Eel River coming into the system no matter what, and that we have to make better use of our water. The third thing I would say is that we also have a $9 million proposal that we're hopeful will get funded by Department of Water Resources with $3 million local, working with landowners in the Alexander Valley to use their irrigation systems and their frost control systems during the high weather events to actually use that existing infrastructure to get the water out on the ground when the big flows come through, so that it, as they call it, slow it, sink it, spread it, so that all those sprinklers, instead of taking water during the summer months, are putting the water on a high flow event out onto the ground, and it's getting down into the soil profile. I had a call with the Secretary of California's Natural Resources about this project, and just our excitement that we have environmentalists, water managers, landowners, and it's led by one of our partners as the Dry Creek Tribe, the Dry Creek Band of Pomo Indians, and just a great partnership there that we want to deliver on. A few final notes is that as the Board of Supervisors, we funded $400,000 and $300,000 respectively for feasibility studies on this thing called FloodMar, which is higher aquifer recharge as opposed to this aquifer storage and recharge, which is getting down into the deeper basins. And then also, as I said, $300K for the drought resiliency countywide, so we can identify these gaps. So what does this all mean? It really means that that the system is doing what it needs to own its responsibility going forward. But I want to look to anybody who is on this call and let you all know that you have your place and your responsibility in the future. 50% of the water used in the summertime when we have the least amount of water and it goes away the quickest is used for outdoor irrigation, lawns, plants, especially invasive water sucking species. Personally on my piece of property, I'd encourage others to do the same. I pulled up all the high water using plants and I replanted with natives, drought tolerant Russian River plants. Also, the future of us just thinking that we're going to be a community of 500,000, and then with Marin also being a water partner, and just have lawns that are not used for anything, that are sucking water in those summer months. We have to have a gut check and see if that's going to be our future. So there's short term, there's long term, but I guess the big message to everybody is you have a role to play. We need you to be voluntarily reducing water now. Why? Because if you like to go to the Russian River, if you like to go and recreate, if you like to be able to open your tap and have clear water, you have to be a part of the solution. So with that being said, I just want to see Grant, if you got any final comments, and I want to thank you all for being with us here today.
Well, it goes without saying, but Chair Gore, I want to thank you for your leadership. You at the helm of our board allow us to continue to explore innovative approaches toward fighting drought and making sure that we're resilient. In many ways, you mentioned the FIRO project. That if we can get that to Lake Sonoma, that's going to go a long way. So the prior work we've done in years before is building upon our work. And I want to make sure our customers know that we're using water as efficiently as possible. Drought's not over, and we need them to be part of that. That's what lets us get through these dry periods. So thank you.
So bringing it all together, I want to thank you all for joining us. What does this all mean? It means we've got to make better use of the water that we already have in the system. It means that when we have high flood events and water coming down and dumping from the skies, that we get that water to slowly percolate into our basins, or we use our system to get that water down into our deeper aquifers. But it also means that all of us have to take ownership of the fact that we are part of the solution. We're doing that with wildfire and turning the corner to be a more resilient community. And we are not fearful about where we're at with water and in these changing climates. We have a plan, we have a focus, and we have partners. And you all are the most important partners. Thank you for joining us.